YouTube and recording, so you should be set to go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call to order the January 5th, 2021 meeting of the South Bristol School Board. It looks like we have a full roll call with everybody here. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There are a couple. Well, actually, we added to new business as a standing item, action on donations. So I think Scott has a couple of donations, but it's not an agenda adjustment now.
Okay. All right, we'll move to the Secretary's report. Approval of the minutes of the December 1st, 2020 regular meeting of the South Bristol School Board. Can I have a motion for that?
Sure, so moved.
Bob, a second? Norman? Are there any discussion on those minutes? All right, everybody in favor of passing the December 1st minutes as submitted? Go ahead and do a show of hands. That's
Good. Yep.
unanimous. Craig?
Thank you.
There's no educational presentation, right, Scott?
That is correct.
Okay. The next regular meeting of the South Bristol School Board will be on Tuesday, February 2nd at 5:30. However, before that, too many things here. Before that, we will have a joint meeting with the selectmen and the budget committee. For those who are comfortable meeting in person, it will be in the gym at South Bristol School, and we will figure out a way to get the people that are not comfortable in person linked in on that. And we're just going to have to kind of bear with the technology. And if you can't hear something, just ask for it to be repeated. And we'll probably have to have a mic to make sure everyone can be heard. But we will try and do the best we can because that is a really important meeting.
And the date and time, Sarah?
The date is January 19th at 5:30 with a snow date of the 20th, if that works.
Thank you.
And I usually talk to Chuck Plummer before to confirm the date with him, but his father just passed away, so I have not done that. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm hoping that with COVID and nobody traveling, it shouldn't be an issue, but I will clear that with the budget committee in the next day or two. Yeah.
Sarah, I don't know if you have all of those members, if you have their email or not, but that would be beneficial. I know that that's always been a little bit of an issue, so that if they don't attend, we're going to kind of need that.
It's always an issue. I'm guessing that we will probably have full participation from the budget committee, but it would actually be a great excuse to get their emails because I have not been able to do that in the last couple of years. But what I will do, once we go through the budget and submit our proposal, we'll have to print it out for them. We'll have to maybe do a little bit of work to the explanation sheet, and then it's got to be a pretty quick turnaround. Lindsay, I'm sorry that I didn't warn you of that before. But if we can get that together, I was actually thinking about going to the selectmen's meeting on Thursday to talk to them about the facilities, the $10,000 for facilities line item that they have put in the budget to see if there's another way we can do that. So I thought I could just hand deliver the budgets that night and get them to the budget committee by Thursday as well.
For you Thursday.
Okay.
So anything you decide tonight won't take me long.
Yeah, that's what.
So.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Okay, so that's the 19th and 20th in the gym. We'll need to wear masks, and I'm sure Scott will have hand sanitizer and seats placed as best we can.
So Sarah, I assume you're foregoing the dinner prior to, which you've done in the past? Good, okay, thank you.
I think if we can have individual bottles of water out, that would be great. But after that, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the next meeting of the AOS board will be Tuesday, January 12th, 2021 at 5 o'clock. The meeting will be held remotely. And I was going to write this down. The policy and finance committees, we've been doing, it's the third Thursday, is that correct?
That sounds right.
So that's the January 21st.
And 3:30 and 4:30? Or
Why did I think it was 3 and 4:30?
3 and 4:30?
I thought so, because I think we did 2:30 last time
I
because we
think
thought
we
we
did.
might
Okay,
have
so-
something. So I think it was finance at 3 and policy at, should we do 4?
That would be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I don't think we have a standing long-range planning meeting, but I think that we should put one on the calendar
Right.
for January.
It's long range. We could have in 2022. That'd be fun.
We got the right guy on the long range planning committee.
Maybe we can arrange that by email.
Sure. What is it?
Craig and
Craig,
Scott, if you want to.
Craig choose when he's free.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just said Craig could choose when he's free because he's undoubtedly the busiest.
I'll take a look at some dates and check with Sarah, and we'll send something out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
AOS 93, we met right before the holidays on the 22nd at GSB, and we were able to pass the budget without too much of an issue.
It only felt
And-
that way to you.
I know, well, no, but without, there were some issues with it, but there were only from like 2 people. So it was, I think that one thing that I learned, which I find true about this meeting too, is that inviting as many people as possible to the meeting before you have to pass the budget and encouraging those people to come and join in on the process as you go along. It's nice to have those conversations in a meeting like this versus being sidelined at a town meeting or at the budget vote with issues that are hard to fix. Some of them don't need to be fixed, but they're hard to address when you're in a meeting where you do have to have a final vote. But all in all, it passed, which was nice. Is there anything else about the AOS, Craig?
Prior to the budget meeting at 6 o'clock, there was a regular board meeting, and the board is talking about their process recommendations for superintendent evaluation. And that will be the primary agenda item for the meeting next Tuesday. We're also looking at the final edits to the updated and revised and edited interlocal agreement. And we'll be looking at some policy, some AOS policies that we have not had in the past around hiring of district administrative staff, and then policies related to the general functions of the AOS board. Yeah, that would do it.
And so what will come out of the superintendent's evaluation is there will be forms that I believe will be sent to us electronically for us to evaluate. In the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of work to make the board evaluation for the superintendent kind of pared down to the areas where we actually have a relationship with Craig, where we can see how he's handling these things instead of we don't see how he interacts with his central office staff or even the principals and admin team per se. So there will be probably some areas on that survey where most of it we will be able to answer because of our interactions with Craig. There may be some areas that we really don't have information on, so don't feel bad about putting not applicable, because there are some things that you're not going to be able to evaluate him on. So we'll probably get that in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have maybe a 1 or 2 week to turn that over to give our feedback so that we can do a comprehensive and fair evaluation of him. So we'll make sure that we'll make sure that you know when it's coming out and when it's due and all of that. The other thing that I don't have on my chair's report, but that I'd like to talk about is both Nick and I are up for, well, our terms are ending Nick gave me permission to say that he's not going to renew his term this year. As you know, he's busy with a new family and work and everything. So we do need to think about another member of the community that might be willing to serve on the board. I don't know exactly when papers are due, but it's usually around the 23rd, 24th, 25th of January. So it's something that we need to really think about. And while we're thinking about that, I'm also just going to throw a reminder that I would like my term on the AOS board to be up in March. So any of you want to jump on that, you can come on the 12th and see what all the fun's about. Nick, I don't know if you had anything to say, or, I mean, oh. You're on mute.
I think he volunteered to go to the
That's
AOS.
okay. Yeah, you're going to sign on for another 3 years. That's great. That's okay. We'll come back to that. All right.
Audio in the bottom left where the microphone is, there's a little arrow next to it. It will show you sometimes when you plug in headphones, it attempts to take over the audio as well. Make sure it says computer audio.
Well, we'll just keep going. He gave me permission to share that with you tonight. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the day. So we'll go ahead and move on to the principal's report. Scott?
Sarah, is there any way to convince you to stay on?
Oh, I haven't necessarily said that I'm not going to take up papers.
Okay.
I haven't decided, honestly.
Okay.
But I would, if there were a 1-year term, I would be thrilled. But thank you. Yeah, no, I likely will take out papers again.
Good.
Is a 1-year term possible? We had talked about in the past.
Well, I mean, you know, I've talked to a lot of people when they're thinking about renewing and saying it is a 3-year term. And so that's what is ideal for us. But when life circumstances change and things change, you know, there are times when people only do serve a year or 2 years. And I think that can be okay. But I think both Nick and my terms are 3 years, because we've kind of had this kind of little grouping of 1 and 1.5 year terms with Don and different things. But I think now we should be on track for getting back to 3-year terms. So.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm back. I just want to say that I would love to stay with you guys. This has been really something very new to me, but it's just been a great experience so far. But life is too hectic for me at the moment, and it deserves more attention. And I can't give you guys the amount of attention that I should be giving you. So
You can always come back on in 5 or 6 years too.
yeah, once things settle down for sure. So.
No, we appreciate the time that you have put in. So
joining us and bringing us an element of a new set of eyes to look at things. We really appreciated your insight, particularly with the facilities pieces, but you've asked some really good questions over the past few months, and it's allowed us to take a look at things as well. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Scott. It's my pleasure.
Would you like me to move forward?
Go ahead.
Sarah, okay. The principal's report is fairly brief. There are a couple of things that I need some help with in terms of a vote, I believe, but I'll begin with the donations. And there are 2 additional donations, both earmarked for the greenhouse. One is the Grassroots Foundation grant and for the amount of $1,275. And the second grant comes from the Maine Environmental Education Grant for $750. And they're both were solicited by our guidance counselor, Deb Thibodeau, who I would put in charge of soliciting grants any day of the week. She has definitely hustled a lot of money for this greenhouse. I can't wait for it to be done. I'm expecting that to be done in the spring. So it should look like the Taj Mahal of greenhouses when we're done. So is it possible, Craig, to make a minor adjustment in the agenda to just have a vote now? What
With
do you
the
want?
agreement of the board chair, it certainly is.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2 donations for the greenhouse in the amount of around $2,000. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Nick.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you. Thanks,
Unanimous.
Scott.
Thank you very much. Next in the report is just, I like to do this every now and then. It keeps me grounded in who we have here at the school because it is an ever-changing target. The enrollment information, South Bristol School is responsible for 67 students pre-K through 8. So, and that counts 60 full-time students, 5 online learners, and 2 district placements. So, when you look at it on paper, it's a lot bigger than it looks when you're driving by. So I like to add that, and it has changed. If you've noticed, when I do this every month, the numbers change every single month. So it's a good exercise to do.
And Scott, I'd encourage you too, especially as we think towards the budget, to actually bump that number up to 70, because I think that we really do have 3 students who have chosen to not be at school because of COVID, but that are dedicated to South Bristol and will be returning most likely next year.
Yeah, and we that being said, I know that we may lose some as well. So I try to balance that out, but for all intents and purposes for discussion, yes, I would love to put that in there, add those and round it up to 70, which ironically is the same number that we had my very first year here 15 years ago. So, okay.
Has it ever been above 70 in your tenure?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Just the demographics just kind of shows you who's been here, the veteran families, who has moved in recently, people that we have had a lot of families move in, and it's not necessarily a COVID situation, but we have had a lot of people rent or buy down here. Not as many buy, but certainly a lot of renters. So it's good to see. I think we look back at the conversations that we had 2 or 3 years ago when we set goals about where we wanted to be enrollment wise, and we were going to go on a big PR marketing stint, and we didn't really need to do that, and things just sort of blossomed. So that's a good thing. Sarah, you had asked me to run some pre-KK figures. So we looked at this again, and those are the numbers that we projected, again, highlighting the moving target from a year ago, what we expected and what actually came, or who actually came. And then next year we predict 6 and 7 respectively, pre-K and K, and we'll wait and see, I guess.
Great, thank you.
Okay, a couple of other bulleted items for facilities and maintenance. We were able to procure funding, thanks to Lindsay, with some CRF funds for additional cafeteria benches. It is certainly a COVID-related expense, so it passes that test. As you know from our budget building a year ago, cafeteria benches are not cheap. So that was an excellent use of that funding. So thank you very much, Lindsay, for that. The next item is with the lighting. And I'll let you know that Demoro was here over vacation and worked on the lighting in the gym. There are 5 banks of lighting. He fixed 4 of the 5 banks running parallel with the gym. He could not reach the very top peak with the equipment that he has. So he's working on trying to procure some sort of a rolling scaffolding or a scissor lift or something to reach all the way up there. But the boys that were putting it in over vacation with the device that they had, the piece of equipment, they were shaking in their boots. So I think that they would like to have something a little bit sturdier. So the lighting, we are moving forward, and that is in keeping, I looked at our minutes from last time, keeping with the board's directive to bring forward different projects to look at that we can use the funding this year to help knock off our list based on the short and long-term facility planning that has been done. The lighting is one of them. So it's good to know that the gym is almost all set. And then there's one classroom that needs to be upgraded from the traditional, I think they're T5 lightings to the LED lighting. So we will get that squared away. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to handle the expense without any issue. This is something that I would like you to have some discussion on and hopefully vote or just charge me with moving forward with a certain option. But the security alarm, we've had several different quotes. I wrote those quotes down in those paragraph forms. Shane and I walked around with different people, and it's interesting how they bring a different set of eyes to our needs. It's really how much what level of specificity do we really want for our school? We could go as crazy as we want or as limited as you want, and we tried to find a middle ground. So the numbers for Seacoast Security is 4,070. Cunningham was about half of that, but it also, I will say, was also about half of the amount of equipment that went along with that. And Care was much more expensive, and they had more high-end equipment as well. For whatever it's worth, in meeting with Seacoast Security and the number of how often they come down to South Bristol and the people they service down here, and he was very personable. Shane and I both liked him, and he walked us through exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. He is doing wireless wherever he can, but there are two areas that he does have to wire in, and those are the main control panels and receivers. So where the keypad is going to be in the gym and the keypad by the front door, those have to be wired into the technology room, but the rest of it should be wireless. So I guess I'm looking for a little direction to move forward with one of these, and the work can be, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there. I've done quite a bit of work with Seacoast in the past on residential applications, and they've been great to work with, very responsive as far as communicating with us and stuff. They seem very, very professional manner as well. I trust them as a company. Not a whole lot of work with Cunningham in the past, but I can vouch for Seacoast.
What do the other schools in the area use? I know
Jefferson's used both Cunningham and Care before and had no issues. Cunningham was able to do things that American Glass and several, Norris weren't able to get done. They were very effective and helpful when no one else could manage to get something done. They did get it done. So I have a good history with them. Care I know has been used, but I don't have a personal recommendation or up and down. The other schools, I think it's sort of the same thing. Seacoast is pretty common. Norris comes out to do alarm things, but that's often people are looking to have Cunningham or Seacoast come do other things around that.
Do you have a preference?
I would definitely prefer Seacoast Security. I've dealt with them on a different side of the equation, in the painting side, going into people's houses. But also when Matthew came and he walked around with us, he knew his stuff. I was very confident. I asked really foolish questions, as you can probably imagine. And he walked me through the whole thing, and Shane as well. And Shane was really impressed. So for whatever it's worth, I would definitely prefer to go with Seacoast, not to mention that they are local and they'll be very responsive. So I know, and that's not to diminish the other companies at all. It's just, it's a known entity for me.
Does this allow separate access to the gym?
It can. What happens is it's when I say the basics, it's the first one in disarms it and the last one out arms it. And both keypads talk to each other. So if you were to go in the gym and disarm the gym, you're disarming the entire school, which is fine.
No, that's a lot of responsibility on the person, the non-school employee who is using the gym.
So if you, when you're the last one out and you arm it, I can ask that question to see if it is separated, but it's all tied into one radio transmitter that goes back to their company. So I'm not sure if it can be separated, Sarah.
Well,
I
I
can
mean, I
ask.
think we discussed this before, and I think we really need to find out the answer to that, since it's a town building that has separate use from the school. And I know this muddies the waters every time we talk about it, but I think it needs to be figured
So
out.
you're talking, then I think what it's going to end up being is two completely, because I remember this now, it's going to be two different systems.
I think that's what we had talked about before.
Did it double the cost, Scott, or is it?
I don't know if it's going to double it, but it's definitely going to increase it for sure.
The price of a control panel.
And I'm happy to, I mean, I'll go and present the budgets to the selectmen on Thursday. I'm happy to talk to them.
And
as
Scott,
well.
I think you have some flexibility in this year's budget.
We do have some flexibility. So I think that we can move forward with these projects because of how flexible and we were last
Right.
spring and summer, but
This was, you had about $30,000, is that right? Am I?
26,000, yes.
Okay. And what else is kind of on the table besides the security and the lighting?
That's pretty much it. Because the other items are going to be really heavy hitters, and I don't have it in front of me. I don't have the facility plan in front of me, but I know that the roof is going to need a little work. Oh, I know another expense that we might be able to take care of is on the east side of the building that faces the soccer field. That all could be power washed and stained and be within our budget. And that's not just an eyesore, but it's the integrity of the wood is called into question. So that we do have some room for that.
So Sarah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I mean, wondering if you want to give Scott the okay with the security, Seacoast security up to a particular amount, separating out the gym and the school access, just to move it along and get it done.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
I can do that, but I'll keep you up to date too
yeah,
with that.
I mean, do you think like up to $7,000?
I might have a better idea after tomorrow when I call him. I mean, I don't want to write a check I can't cash, although I have done that before.
Yeah, what do other people feel?
I think up to 7 is plenty.
If it's more than that, then we just won't move forward. I'll come back to you with a number.
Yeah, and again, we can call a meeting if it needs a vote, or if we need to, if it's that much more, or if we have to decide if the selectmen have different input, or if they say it can all be on one system, or they don't need it,
Yeah, and you could do a quick meeting on the 19th or 20th too, if you wanted.
Right,
You'll be
that's true.
together.
Yeah.
But as soon as I'll frame this question for Matthew at Seacoast, but as soon as he gives me an answer, I'll relay that to the entire board so you're aware of it.
Okay. Yeah, I would make a motion to proceed with the security alarm work with Seacoast Security, providing we can figure out a system to keep the gym separate at a cost not to exceed $7,000.
Second.
Thanks.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And then I know I was thinking about the power washing work when we were talking about this a minute ago, but do we have numbers on that? Well, if you can include the numbers on that in your email, that would be great.
We have the numbers on that from
I have
our
it numbered.
long range planning. It should be in a spreadsheet somewhere. I think it's 3,000. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a lot.
Okay, great.
Okay. And lastly, before we go to the ever-present proposed budget, just a quick tier 3 update is that Courtney continues to come and meet with our teachers. A lot of things were kind of slowed down from last month with December. I will let you know that she has developed a schedule and which is earmarked for 3 teachers at a time for a month, and then she'll go to another set of 3 teachers and then another set of 3 teachers. She's really committed towards professional development and wants to spend an ample amount of time with each person rather than just sort of going on the surface with each person. So she's the real deal.
Is she monitoring their classes, Scott, or?
She's watching them, and through 2 different eyes, Bob. One is from a curriculum standpoint, looking at the standards that they're teaching, but also from a pedagogy standpoint in how they're teaching those standards. So it's the scope and sequence of what we're supposed to teach that is aligned with the standards. And then the other part is, how do you teach those standards to the kids? Which seems really easy. If all the kids were exactly the same, that'd be a piece of cake. But the kids are so different, you've got to kind of modify some things. So
Are the
as you
teachers
know,
finding it helpful? Do you know?
the feedback has been beneficial so far, but there just haven't been enough of the visits quite yet. She's still just kind of dipping her toes and walking around and doing her observations. She's an active observer, and what I mean by that is that she spends a lot of time talking with the students while she's doing the observations, rather than assume how many kids are engaged in the lesson. You just go up to them and ask them, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And if they look at, and they're pretty good, they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So, or, oh yeah, we're doing this, and here's why.
That's good feedback. Thanks.
Okay, so that's pretty much my report, and I'll kind of wait again, I think, until it's my turn back on the soapbox to talk a little bit about the budget, but I'll wait.
And this is the point in the meeting where I lose my agenda, like I do every, oh, here we go. Now that's principal report. Anyone want to help me out here?
We're on to the superintendent's report and
All right.
the financial review of fiscal year 21.
All right, go for it, Craig.
Superintendent's report, since COVID has been thin, a lot of our energy is going into budgets, contract negotiations. And when I say thin, we just don't have some of the regular ongoing rigorous, relevant professional development that we've been doing. Some of the activities have really been diminished, but there is an awful lot going on as far as budgets and school board meetings. But Lindsay has a quick review of fiscal year 21. I think it probably hasn't changed much since the December meeting. I think there it was the $26,000 remaining, and we talked about these projects that Scott had just proposed. I think there are a couple changes in secondary enrollment that impact fiscal year 22, but not fiscal year 21.
What do you need me for?
That
I
was
like how you phrased it in a question.
Yeah.
Yes, you have had a secondary student move to a different school, so that will come off. That will come off your rolls, but don't get excited for FY22 because we found other students that we added back in there. So we'll get to that when we get to FY22. But your budget for FY21 is about the same as it was last month. Perfectly on track. You won't see the secondary enrollment dropping in it because the money's encumbered. So when we get to the end of the bills and we have extra in the encumbered, that's when you'll see that a student wasn't charged for a full year. So that we know about that, but it's not showing in the report at the moment. But otherwise, everything looks on track, just like it was last month. If any of you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Hearing none right now, I'll just jump in and say, I think a question on some people's minds is the Brewer audit report. We have been working with Bobby to determine a schedule. the pandemic, again, has changed the way that information is shared. It's not as readily available. It's going back and forth more electronically than the actual visit to the school and the central office sites. We're hoping to have those audits, the majority of them in February. We may have to delay a couple till March, but Lindsay's prepared to request the extension that is necessary. But we have been in touch with them. We know it's important. They just aren't able to get them done in the same expeditious way that they have been in the past.
And it's fair to say we're still doing fairly well compared to across the state. All auditors across the state are backed up with the new methods of trying to do this. And the state actually changed it. If you apply for an extension, it's no longer a 30-day extension. You automatically have 90 days because they know so many people are so far behind in trying to get these done. So there is reflective action of the pandemic and trying to meet those needs.
And so, Sarah, if that is ready for the February meeting, we'll certainly line Bobby or Fred up to walk us through that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And if you haven't found your agenda, we're on to fiscal year 22 proposed
It was on
budget.
the floor. Yeah. All right.
That my cue?
Yeah, sure. Take it.
Scott, Lindsay and I had talked about this. Lindsay, are you putting the budget up on screen or?
That was my plan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm not ready for this change on the fly. We'll
Yeah.
see how this.
You're going to be okay.
No, I don't. So as Lindsay does that, I just want to make a couple of opening remarks and just say that this is our second run through this. I anticipate maybe a little change here and there, and if we can, we will certainly do that. And I'll do my best to explain the lines that we put together here from the school, but I may ask Lindsay to chime in on the district level lines that she put in. As we look at this, I would like the board to, As we look at this, I would like the board to keep in mind that there are still some unknowns. Mainly the carry forward is unknown, the state subsidy is unknown. Those are a couple of revenue sources, as well as this being a contract year for both support staff and teachers. So that's something to have in the back of your mind. All those have a pretty big impact on the budget planning as well as the execution. And I think if I remember from our first draft, it may have been something like 25% increase from one year to the next. And if you look at the end of the budget this year, you will see that it is nowhere near that. So we were able to shave quite a bit. I know that after our last meeting, Sarah, Bob, and I were at a selectmen's meeting and spoke a little bit there, and they agreed to do some funding for the Learning Center, so that we removed that right away from the budget. So that was a significant savings. And so our budget increase, I believe, currently, as of right this second, stands at 3.41%. Okay. I have a little sheet note here. It doesn't look maybe as fancy as Craig's budget explanation guide, but I put together a pamphlet, and you don't have this yet, but you will after tonight. If I just wanted to hold off after meeting with Craig and Lindsay, so that if there are any changes, we can do this. But it's a pretty handy pamphlet that has all the information that we need on it. So beginning with the first cost center, regular instruction, there's an increase of 4.19%. Lines of interest include line 1 under salaries, historically has been over budgeted, and Lindsay has made some corrections, so you will see a reduction. I'm sure that makes everybody happy to see. Anytime you see parentheses, that's a good thing. Lines 21 through 28 are all separated out, and they fall within the pre-K section. That's important because we get reimbursed for the pre-K expenses. I believe it's 2 years out, but there is a reimbursement for that. Line 18 and line 19 are more accurate representations of what's actually being spent and how it's being spent. So line 18, classroom books, were removed from the supply line, and it was given its own line in line 19. So if you look at it's just more specific, and it tells a better story than trying to lump everything into classroom supplies. It's always been a little unknown if teachers buy classroom books, why that's always been in the supply line. I've never really understood that, and now it's not. Line 22.
Can I go back to that for a second?
Sure.
Okay, so I understand that you separated them out. Is that an additional decrease as well? It looks like separating it out is minus 3,500, and then you put in 2,200 for the books, classroom books. Is that right?
It looks like it would be an overall decrease of 1,500, Sarah, if you combine the lines.
Okay, and I just want to
That's how I'm reading it.
right, yeah, no, I agree. I just want to make sure, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of truth into the fact that teachers a lot of times pay for their own supplies. And I just want to make sure that this is the number of what we need so that we can support our teachers not to do that. And that there's the historical basis for that decrease even of $1,500.
That's a little surprising because I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of our teachers spending their own money on supplies. And if that were to happen, I would try to make sure that stopped. And that
Perfect. Okay.
I'm not aware of that, Sarah. And that kind of bums me out a little bit if that's the case, because we do have money in our budget solely for that. And
I'm hoping that's not the case too. I just know that sometimes that can happen in schools, and I just want to make sure that
I think you're right. I just don't think it happens here, or if it does, it doesn't happen. It's certainly not common practice.
Okay.
Our teachers are equipped and given what they need in order to do their job. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Okay.
Okay. I lost my track here. Okay, line 30 is an increase in the 9 through 12 secondary education from the 27.5 that we had last year to 30.5 this upcoming year. That's what we anticipate. Everybody's clear with what a half a student is? Hearing none, I'll move forward. Line 31.
Sorry, Scott, it's me again.
Oh, that's okay.
So we're going up to 31.5 students, you said?
30.5.
Okay. So, and the total increase for that is the secondary private tuition plus the IVF?
Yes, the IVF is line 31.
Okay, so that's.
So as the number of students goes up, it's based on a formula, and that's when that IVF goes up.
Okay, now that makes sense, because in your guide, it had said an increase of 44, but then if we've lost half a student, that makes sense. Okay, I was just trying to match the guide to the budget with the numbers, and now without half a student, it makes sense that it's a little bit less than 44,000. Thank you.
So Lindsay, are you there?
And yeah, tuition rates actually came out today. So
Thank you.
Those were factored in with a 4% increase, which it wouldn't be more than that. And it actually was less than that. So I can adjust those numbers down. The IVF will go down to about 20,000 and the secondary private tuition will go down to about 330. So when I make those adjustments, I now have actual numbers to work with.
So you cut out a little bit when you said the private tuition. What will that go down to? About?
It should be about 350, between 350 and 351,000. So you'll have about 15,000 there, and between the two lines, about 17,000 that I'll be able to reduce those to.
So that'll take us down below 50%.
Yeah, it's a budgeting high, hoping that they come in, and they just were released today. So
I'd rather them go that way. It's good to go high. That's great.
So just before we move on, going back to fiscal year 21, you will see an impact, if I'm correct, in fiscal year 21 when Lindsay comes to you next month, because we've been operating on prior year rates. So those rates still need to be increased. Lindsay, is that correct?
The FY21 was budgeted based off the prior year's tuition rates.
Right.
There'll be an increase. It was actually not a significant increase this year.
Okay, good.
So
Okay.
you'll see minimal impact in the 21 budget.
But there will be a slight increase when you adjust those.
Yes, but then a student left, so it'll
Okay.
pretty much offset.
Thank you.
Good news, Lindsay. Thank you. So that going back to that cost center, it will not represent a 4.19% increase. When we get an updated budget, it'll have a different number. Special education numbers, that cost center will go up 13, as of what I have in front of me, 13.59%. Items of interest, lines of interest include an increase in enrollment of 9 through 12. Line 45 should include a total of, do we want to go with 5 or we want to go with 6? We have,
With 6, we did discover another student that needs to be added to that line today. So that line will go up. Sorry, I have the number. My desk is only so big. I have the number right here.
Just don't say 17,000.
No, it'll go up about 11 and a half.
All right, so we're
Yeah, you'll still
go
have
ahead a little bit.
you'll still have savings, yes.
so I want the board to understand that the enrollment at the 9 through 12 level it's difficult to really hone in on, because you get the Lincoln Academy bills, you get what's on NEO, which is like a student information system for attendance that works through the state. And then you have what the word on the street. And then you try to tie them all together. And I feel pretty comfortable that number's real.
It actually, the definite number in that line will be 67,650. So it will go up 10,150. And again, that's because we were working with prior numbers and we're adjusting for that. So it offsets a little bit. So 67,650 will be that final number.
And Kelly, I'm going to give you a chance to chime in here after I get done, but we'll see what happens here. On line 46 and
Wait, I'm sorry, Lindsay, can you repeat that final number? What is that final number?
67,650.
And that refers to which line? What are we? I'm
That
sorry.
is line 45.
45. So say that one more time again. I'm sorry.
That's fine. 67,650.
For line 40, line 45. Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Just before you move on, just to be clear, because I know that this is an issue, that is the charge from Lincoln Academy for students with IEPs in addition to regular education tuition.
That is 100% correct.
Okay, thanks.
And that's a big increase from, I mean, it's basically doubling what we have now. So.
Yes, it is.
So line 46 and 47 are our district programs, and the increase there results in an increase in enrollment and services within each of the respective programs. I think we talked a lot about that last month. So line 55 is a pretty big increase, but that has been under budgeted and misbudgeted over the last several years. And so that this is a real figure for our speech and language teacher. It's 1/5 of her total salary, and we have her 1/5 of the time.
And if you just look back towards the second column in where it says 20,538, that's an actual cost where what was budgeted was about 5,000, and the last few years show. So this is just a more accurate budgeting.
And that's the rest of it, I think we've kind of gone over before, but Kelly, is there any other piece that you want to bring to the table in terms of the special ed cost center?
I don't think so, but I'm happy to answer any questions. It sounds like last month you did already talk about the Compass and Pathways program.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
we're accounting for related services and things like that in there.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being on hand for questions, though. So thanks for joining us tonight.
I
Well,
will say Kelly and I have spent a lot of time today and last night on line 48 Shrep, and you'll notice I took out the 2,200 and Kelly and I discovered that we need to put that back in. So you will have that 2,200 in there, and Kelly can speak more about that program.
Sure.
That's
sure. It's sure. That's a regional program. And the program is housed over at Wiscasset Middle School and High School. And we are participating with them. I serve on the board with them. And if we, at times we have sent students to that program. Currently, we don't have any students there. But it definitely, the cost to send a student there is $15,000 a year, which is significantly less than a program such as like Spurwink or the Pathways Mary Meaning program in Bath. So it's nice to have that available to us because there are always students who come in that need those kind of services.
Kelly, is that a district shared, like all schools chip in for that? Or is it an individual school decision?
Yep. Each school is chipping in. And Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but 2% for South Bristol?
It's through the 912 cost sharing formula. So Great Salt Bay doesn't chip in, but Damerscott, Bremen, and Newcastle see it in their secondary budget. And when I separate these out, it's in your secondary as well. Yes, Bristol's, I believe, was the percentage was correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. No problem.
And I'll add Kelly's piece to finding students and putting them where they need to be in the budget. It's in the moving pieces. I failed to mention the special ed population tends to be migratory and it kind of bounces around. So we try to find different kids. So that's just another card in our poker hand. Okay. Career and technical education instruction. We put a small placeholder there. Other instruction is just a placeholder, and we decided this year to have a lot less as a placeholder. I think it's 100 rather than 1,000 before, and that is a placeholder in case we needed to move money from one cost center to another, but that entire cost center is funded by the Burns Family Foundation. Student and staff support is up 12.07%. Line 74 represents the increase in nurse hours and that's basically doubled from what was budgeted this year to next year. And line 95 accurately reflects our subscriptions to the different software programs that we have. And then the amount of this line was subtracted from line 99, which was a computer software purchase. So rather than a computer software purchase, it's really re-upping subscriptions. They're not purchasing new software. It's renting the software. So you're not purchasing it. You're just keeping subscriptions going. So again, it shows the level of specificity that Lindsay is insisting that we show transparency with. System administration cost center is up 20%, and line 112 and 113, that increase is due to the district cost sharing change from 4% to 6%. Okay, the next cost center is the school administration, and that is up 1.06%. And line 129 is a line of interest, and that is basically a reduction just based on trends. We looked at that and we just weren't spending it, so we didn't put it in. We want to put in what we need and take out what we don't. The transportation and the buses cost center is down 10.4%. So that decrease represents line 131, which is a reduction in the amount necessary for a bus monitor, a year-long bus monitor. We certainly need one for the first few months, but after that, I think we're in pretty good shape. And then, speaking of which, and then also line 133 and 134 show savings as, and I don't know if you want to speak to this, Lindsay, or not, but our high school run, we tend to pick up people and drop them off, and they're not South Bristol kids, so that Lindsay has, in her wisdom, shared that cost with the representative towns, and it shows a savings for us.
I'd love to take credit for that, but First Student told me they bill you for half a run on the high school. So, but you did ask me to separate out K-8 transportation First Student from 9-12. So you can see in the past that has been one line and now it is two.
It's just, I know it's hard for people when they see the high school bus and they see one student on it or two, and you're like, oh, what is that? So it is good to know that the service is being used by other people. And the next cost, facilities and maintenance is down 12.27%. And I know that is a huge reduction in what traditionally has been a pretty expensive cost center. But I think it represents a lot of projects that have been done in the last 2 or 3 years, and the work that we've paid for, as well as the town has stepped up and paid for different projects. We can kind of take a little step back, and this isn't Scott talking. This is based on the short, long-term facility plan that's been developed. So again, in keeping with the charge of, if you need to put it in, if you don't, take it out. And with that come different spikes and valleys in different lines and cost centers, and for the overall budget for that matter. And that shows it there.
Is 152, again, like you said, just a more accurate representation? I know that's something that we have wanted to make sure that I'm assuming that's the line that we pay specialty services to look at the heaters and all of that stuff. I just want to make sure that we're not, and I know you wouldn't knowingly do this, but I just want to make sure we're not cutting any corners on the maintenance that we need to keep our systems running as smoothly as possible. It might just be that we increased that line when we were needing it, and we realized we weren't spending it.
Right. And I think it's also based on past spending.
Okay.
And may I ask, line 148, Scott, are those additional hours?
That's for a part-time custodian.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this would be a good place to kind of follow up from our admin meeting earlier, Craig, that when we built this budget, we're building in the sort of the worst case scenario piece in terms of making sure that we're ready and we're prepared and we're funded in case we have to continue with the steps that we've taken for COVID. If we don't, then we won't spend that money. We're not just going to spend it just to spend it. But we'll be ready and prepared if we do. So I wanted to put that out there, that yes, there may be additional hours built in, but if it's not necessary, we won't use those.
And I think you can say that about anything related to COVID. We're covering our bases and we're planning for the worst, hoping for the best, but knowing that we don't dare reduce what we think that we might need to keep the kids in school.
Okay. And last but not least, the food service cost center, and this is a standalone service, And we agreed last year, and we just continued with that to subsidize that program by including $25,986. And for those new to the party, food service programs usually lose money traditionally, every school, everywhere, all over the planet. And this money helps support that cost center so that if we did go into the red, we don't have to take out of the operating budget, and then it can kind of handle its own problems if it's funded and subsidized within that cost center. Hope that makes sense.
And just a little aside, I can't remember if we talked about it at the last budget meeting or if it was one in one of the policy or one of the committees that we had at the end of December, but Scott did kind of run the numbers, and he found that 20% more kids are eating meals this year. And I can't say for sure that that's tied to the fact that the meals are free or not. But I just thought it was an interesting aside, especially with some of the conversations we've had amongst ourselves and with the town about the possibility of someday providing free meals to everybody who goes to South Bristol School. So it was just an interesting thing to put in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind that right now we're seeing that 20% more of kids are eating, or I guess it's 20% increase in the food that's being served.
So if I'm going to go on a different tack, bring me back. But one of the things I'd asked Lindsay to do, Scott and I had talked about it, was to separate out elementary from secondary costs. One of the important distinctions between some of our AOS schools and towns, the Great Salt Bay CSD does not have secondary costs built in, but their member towns, Bremen, Damascus, and Newcastle do. Our other schools have secondary and elementary costs within one town budget. Scott had talked and Lindsay had spoken about the increases in the tuition and the secondary costs. And I don't know, Lindsay, if you have it available to bring up, and I'm just going to jump to the end, but the secondary costs separated and aggregated as secondary costs without elementary costs are going up roughly 25% or $105,000, whereas your total budget, secondary and elementary, is only going up 3.4% or $70,000. So all of the increases and decreases, elementary and secondary, results in an overall increase of about 3.5%, but your secondary costs are going up almost a quarter of 25%. And I think it's worth considering the impact that it's not all going to the school, but it is all going to South Bristol students.
The secondary is all going to South Bristol students.
Exactly. Yes.
Um,
I'm just thinking that when Nick departs, we should buy him a mug.
That's another big job. And is there a way to, let's see, for the elementary education, actually, I don't know. Be interesting to, at first I was thinking it might be interesting to separate out the special ed costs from the elementary budget, but the big increase there is really secondary education. It's not elementary.
Right.
Although Compass and Pathways are both an elementary.
And the speech and language.
Yeah, and those are all really adjustments rather than increases in services. And again, a more accurate accounting of what is actually provided to the students in South Bristol.
I have that document ready. If you'd like to have me screen share the 912 costs, I can, or I can just send it out by email to you.
You want to just pop it up for a second, Lindsay, just since we've.
All right, can you make it bigger?
Yes. Believe I can.
Yeah, no, keep going. There you go.
That's about as big as I can get on one screen.
Hey, that works for me.
And the background words are just the reference only. And they're supposed to be behind, not blocking any numbers. So I'll have to fix that.
So there you see your increase in secondary private tuition. I'm assuming that's 3 tuitions. And then the insured value, private placement, special education private placement, that's 3 students. You've got some decreases, and then the shared speech going down, but that's a secondary speech, not the 0.2 FTE South Bristol speech. Total increase 105,334 or 25.67%. Oh, Lindsay, you've changed it since you gave this to me. 117,760, 2870. That was that extra. That's that extra student, Lindsay.
This has the 6th secondary.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And you told me about that.
Yes. So, and even though the contractor transportation 912 is in here as an increase of 34, remember in the past it was rolled in with elementary. So that looks like it's an entire brand new cost, but it's just finally separated out clearly.
If I may, for that reason, should it even be in this schedule? It's not a true increase.
It's not an increase, but it is a cost. And I was asked to bring up the 912 costs.
Oh, okay. This is just 912. Okay.
Yes.
And does this include the corrected numbers for the LA tuition?
No, not for
Okay,
the.
so it'll go down a little.
So line 2, correct. Line 2 is not, and line 3 are not updated, but I was able to, before this, update line 6
Okay.
and 7. So
Great.
6 and 7 are the ones that I've already done. 2 and 3 I have not, and will go down
Right.
a little bit.
Yeah, that's the 17 that you were talking about before. So it's, yeah.
Correct.
That's really helpful. Thank you for doing that.
I'll make sure that gets put in the drive as well, so you all have access to it. Once I make the reference words fade behind and not block numbers.
Yeah.
Well, it really does show it because, I mean, that shows an increase of, I think when you adjust for the Lincoln Academy cost, a little over 100,000. Our budget's increasing by 70 plus. So, we're even eating some of that increase by cutting in other places. So that's very helpful.
So I will say, keep in mind that 9 through 12 number does fluctuate. I mean, we only, last summer, I expected that we'd have 2 8th graders. All of a sudden 2 turned into 5. And then I'm planning ahead here. We have a pretty large junior year class at Lincoln Academy. And we have a large 7th grade class, although that 7th grade class we do have a lot of open enrollment students that we're not responsible for. But it's that looking ahead in the movement of students out and students in, and that it's always a moving target. But I try to look ahead. It's a good year to have a big class going out and a big class coming in.
Well, and you're right, Scott, because it's also complicated, and I know you've already accounted for it, but you have students attending other schools who are South Bristol residents who you have to find and bring them in. You have students at South Bristol School who are not residents who you have to subtract, and then you've got your seniors going out, your 8th graders coming in. It's wicked complicated to get it right. And that's even, we land pretty well, but we do include 2 contingencies just for those unknowns.
There's a lot of people involved in that number. There's a lot of checks and balances from a lot of different people to make sure that that's right. Okay, that's it.
Craig, you're becoming a real meaner. You said wicked.
I said that. That's making me a Mainer?
That's it.
Well, thank you, Bob. You made my night.
Is there any other discussion on the budget? Does anyone else have any other questions or concerns or thoughts? Okay. I have tier 3 update, but Scott, did we cover that? Is there anything else you need to add on that?
The only other thing is that tomorrow's staff meeting, we're going to add, we had done this before, but now it's been a couple of months since we did it. So we're going to add additional evidence to the recommendations that Mary Jane put out, as well as what was brought to light in the comprehensive needs assessment in the tier 3 document. So basically we combined both, created, I don't know what they're, 23 of the recommendations, and under each one, we're providing evidence of our growth in each one of those. So tomorrow's staff meeting will give us an opportunity to add to that.
Sounds good.
Sarah, maybe I'll just add a comment that we made at the Finance Committee meeting, and that is to summarize the major changes. Most of them will more than cover the 70K increase. And those changes are everything due to COVID and everything due to secondary private education. Those alone cover more than the 70K increase. And I think that'd be a good way to present the budget to the information, to the selectmen. COVID and special education and secondary education.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And Scott, I don't know if that document that you have is something that you can email to us, but I know
I'm writing on it right now as we speak on that.
I just want to, and we have presented the budget committee with lots of different formats for this information. And I think that when we got together, I don't know if it was a year and a half ago, it was not at our traditional budget meeting. It was when we invited them to discuss how we do things, that the formats that we'd used were pretty clear. So I think that maybe we can add what you've put together, but I want everybody to really look at it, because I think we had agreed that the format that Craig forwarded, and I apologize because I realized too late that it wasn't forwarded to all of you. It was just forwarded to, I think, Scott and myself, but that was the format that we agreed on. So I think if you can send out that, and if we can all look at it and just make sure that it kind of does fit into the guidelines that we talked about with the budget committee, I'd appreciate that, because I don't want to, it looks like, I'm sure it has a lot of good information. I just want to make sure that we can also easily look through it at the budget meeting on the 19th.
One question we always get asked is about the students who are from other towns who are not paying tuition. Are they incurring special ed cost?
No.
No. And I don't know if I did my math right, but it looks like this year, and I have to admit, when I did my numbers, I included those 3 homeschoolers, 2 which are residents and 1 which is not, and I came out with about a 25% superintendent open enrollment number versus a 75% resident student number. I'll double check that before the meeting, but I think those are the numbers that we're working with this year, which is a little bit of a switch towards a bigger South Bristol population, even if some of those kids might not be with us next year. I think the following year, we're going to go back up to like a 70-30, depending on what the actual enrollment looks like. But I think that will help us a little bit too, having 75% of the students from South Bristol. But you can kind of tweak those numbers with COVID, so it's hard to get the exact percentages right. So Scott, do you think you'll be able to send that out tomorrow, your pamphlet?
I sure will. I'll make a couple of changes because I have to wait for the updated budgets to come in so I can change them a little bit.
Because is that something that you want to go out with the budget to explain it?
I do.
Okay.
It shows more than the budget. That's why it has like school highlights and then each of the lines that we just discussed. And it shows enrollment information, what we have for staffing and who the new staff members were, and then always different pictures of kids doing things. So
perfect.
It's sort of a
It tells the story.
Yep, that's great. And with Lindsay's 912 K8, that'll
I'm
be
going to
good.
add that. I wrote that in there. So I'm going to add that piece that Norman brought up.
Perfect.
I've got to say that the school's communications have certainly become excellent.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. So I realized too, getting used to this new format of having policy or having committees, I kind of, in my report, I kind of skipped over the chairs. I was just concentrating on dates. So I don't know if Normand or Susan or Bob, if you want to, maybe Normand, you can do a little update when we get to policy.
Okay, yeah.
We still have executive, let's see, we still have executive session. So yeah, all right. So we've new business. We just had actions on donations, which we already took care of. So I will kind of hand it over to you, Normand, for the policy. And if you want to mention anything about the finance meeting that we had, you're welcome to do that as well.
Well, the Finance Committee meeting, I think, went well, and all of the major points we discussed, the current year, the next year, and the policies have already been discussed in a lot of depth, so I don't think I need to get into that. For the policies, I don't know if you've had a chance, everyone's had a chance to read them, but the question I have is about membership of the committees. And in the introduction, it says that the standing committee shall be comprised of less than a majority of the board. And that leads to questions in other areas of the policies. That means that has to be 2 or 1. And if it's 2 or 1, we really are not going to get a quorum. It means that in a further article, Sarah is as the chair, is a non-voting member, and the superintendent is a non-voting member, but he can't be a member because he's not a board member. Anyway, I've got a couple of suggestions if that is clear. So the first point is that instead of saying standing committees shall be comprised of less than a majority of the board, we can say shall include less than a majority of the board. Then item B in the policy says that the chair shall appoint members to a standing committee amongst the membership of the board. But the Jefferson Village School policy, which was circulated by Lindsay somewhat earlier, got it right, I think. It says the chair may appoint members to a standing committee from among the membership of the board and the community. So I would add and the community there. Further on, there's a point that the chair and superintendent shall be ex officio non-voting members of all standing subcommittees. I think the chair could be a voting member, and we could just eliminate that. And the superintendent, since membership is extended to the community, then that's fine. The superintendent is now a member, can be a member of the board, but still should be non-voting.
Definitely.
Also, it says that the I think it had said that, and I'm not sure, I think it had said, I can't see it now, that Hang on for 1 second.
When I was looking for my agenda, I found it on the floor. I don't know if that's helpful. I definitely like the idea of adding, can appoint community members to the board. I think that's a great change.
Okay, good. I thought I had seen somewhere that the chairman of the committee shall be appointed by members of the committee. And in fact, the chairman should be a board member, so that when I commented about adding "and the community," you could also add there that the chair shall be, you could say the JSC chair may appoint members to a standing committee from among the membership of the JSC and the community. The chair shall be a member of the board.
Yeah, I think that's important. I like that idea. Yeah, in E, it says that each standing committee will elect its own chair.
Okay, I'm looking at the wrong, oh yeah, I was looking at, yeah, that's what it says. Yep.
So that's section E. You can just say who must
Just
be
eliminate it.
a school board member.
Sorry?
And you're saying to add to that, each standing committee will elect its own chair who must be a school board member?
No, I would just eliminate that completely. And
Okay.
then up in the section, I think it was section
B.
B, say that the board chair shall appoint members to a standing committee, including the board chair. Something like that.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's a good idea about the community members. When I was on the SCDAPA board, the financial committee was made up of bankers and financial advisors and 1 or 2 board members. It was very effective.
Absolutely. Yeah, and on finance committees in the past, and I'd written this into the mandate for the finance committee, we always had finance experts. And I think each of the committees we had, a facilities expert would be good to have on our facilities committee, for example. And so the first point about saying shall include means that there's really no limit. We'd want a quorum because it talks in the operating procedures about a quorum so you can vote, but we didn't have a quorum. But it doesn't limit it, as Craig pointed out. The community is small and it'll be hard to find lots of members, but this way we can have 3 or 5, and it's up to the board chair to decide that. I think that's all I had to say. Is that pretty clear?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you also wrote those to us, Norman. You sent.
Yes, it's pretty much what I said earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make the
And
changes.
that applies to the BDE policy, the board standing committees. And then we're also doing BDER.
I had the only comment on R has been taken care of already.
Okay.
With these changes. The comment was item F. The presence of a majority of the members of a standing committee shall constitute a quorum for voting purposes. Only the members of the committee may vote. So we didn't have a quorum, but now we will.
Okay.
So I think that's okay. So no changes on the operating procedures.
All right. Should we go ahead and call for a motion on BDE and BDER? All right.
Yeah, I would move that we accept Norman's suggestions and changes.
Looks like you are Norman.
We got two more.
Yeah,
That's right, yeah.
I had sent him,
We are identical twins, and it's very hard for people to tell us apart, you know?
No, but he's much older.
All right, I'll second that. Is there further discussion on that?
I'm just going to modify the motion for BDE that as edited by the board.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? And I just lumped those two together, but that's fine, right?
Yes, yeah, we'll bring them out. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll think about going into executive session. Lindsay, was there any public comment?
I do not see any Q&A, and as far as I can tell, nobody has their hand raised to get attention either. So I don't know if you want to give it a second in case anybody wants to hit the button. And Bob, I renamed you.
Can I make one comment?
This is Bob.
there?
You do have all the
As far as
superpowers, Lindsay. I love
long-range,
that. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Committee is
That's
concerned.
fantastic.
Besides the possible topics I sent out when Sarah and I were talking today, she suggested that another one should be enrollment. Because of course, in a couple of years, again, I guess that's going to be somewhat of a crisis thing, and that certainly would deserve its attention all by itself. And she also had suggested that rather than looking just at a 5-year long-range plan, maybe we should kind of look at a short long-range plan for a couple of years to get us through any problems we anticipate. Okay, that's it.
Yes, I'm sorry, Bob. No, I didn't mean to. I think I need to pay more attention when I'm doing my chair's report to give time to the committees, because I really appreciate all the work you put into reading and skimming all those long-term plans. And I liked how concise your report was. And as you said, there are some things that we don't have to look in potentially as thoroughly, or that we already have, like our facilities plan. We need to keep going with that as we can put it out another couple of years. And I was playing with the numbers, the enrollment numbers, which is why I was talking to Bob, because it, depending on the numbers, it looks like maybe we've got 65, 66 kids next year. Of course, that could change. But then depending on what the pre-K class is the next year, with that big class of 15 or 16 seventh graders that we have this year, our numbers could potentially plummet down to 55 again in 2 years. So I was worried about it being too long a range plan when we're talking about enrollment and the viability of the school. So I wanted to see if we could concentrate on that. And also just curious to know if the numbers that I quickly projected really do make sense, if that is the kind of the projection for 2 years from now or not, because I don't have all the pieces of information. I just have, what I think from knowing some of the families in town, but I think that will be important.
Well, there's a potential for a pre-K here next year.
Yeah.
Yep, we got you signed up.
Sure.
Or Penny signed up.
Yeah.
And we
So
can't
Sarah,
wait for that.
as we look into executive session, I'm assuming that we will not come back to open session. Is that correct? You're not taking any action, I don't believe.
No.
Okay. So when you make a motion to go into executive session, I'll stop the recording and stop the live stream. And there are 4 attendees that will either remove themselves, or I can remove. If they're just listening in the background and not paying attention, I can remove them as well before we go in.
Oh, I'm sure they're riveted to our conversation. Susan, as policy chair, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, all I would say is that we had a meeting scheduled for the day that we had a snow day, and it didn't mean that we couldn't meet, but it sort of messed up our schedule a little for some of us. So we didn't end up meeting, and our plan was to reconvene after the holidays. So I'm assuming we'll just stick with the meeting that's scheduled for the next meeting that's on the schedule, and sort of just reconvene and keep going with the work we were doing, but there isn't really anything new since we last talked, I don't think.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. How do I do this every single time? Okay. I will make a motion to adjourn the public portion of the South Bristol School remote meeting and enter into remote executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations between public employer and teachers and support staffs pursuant to 1 MSRA 405D. Can I have a second? All right, all those in favor? All right, we will go ahead and